All good?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. So let's just try one last time before people drop off.
Amazing. I can see we've still got our attendees still viewing. So whilst we've still got people, Rob, I will let you kick off.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully, this will be the final time. It's good to be here. Apologies for the technical issues. I just want to just briefly set out the direction of travel on the government's apprenticeship and skills reforms, and then I'll be pleased to take a number of questions from you. What you just need to look at, the first of all, there's four pillars of the new skills growth nexus, and then there's three direction of travels. And I want to just go through the four pillars first. The modern industrial strategy that was published only last month. That's the strategic what. It kind of sets out a 10-year economic vision for the country, but critically, it identifies eight key growth sectors. They're called IS8. And the idea is that the skills policies back and are built around those eight sectors. The second, so if you imagine the industrial strategy, that is the what. Then, of course, you have the new Skills England body. That's the operational how. So Skills England's been established, new board, new chair, two new chief executives. That's tasked with architecting the workforce needed to deliver the industrial strategy. And its mandate is to be data-led, identifying skills gaps across the economy with a specific focus, as I've mentioned, on the industrial strategy. And then, of course, you have the third pillar, which is the third and fourth, which of course is the October 2024 budget and the spending review. So that's the financial with what. So as I mentioned, if you imagine the industrial strategy is the what, the Skills England report, Skills England body is the how, and the budget and the spending review as the with what, that is in essence how to make the strategic vision a reality. And of course, there's 6.7 billion in capital investment for education and 1.4 billion for schools, but there's an extra 1.2 billion annually for skills by 28-29, aimed at supporting high quality training for around about 1.3 million 16 to 19-year-olds. Now, if that is the kind of strategy and how that strategy is to be implemented, what are the three directions of travel? Well, this is very, very clear by the government. They are going to focus on priorities, and that is what the industrial strategy is about. So all the skills investment will be focused around the priorities of the government. So, for example, housing is a priority, building houses. So they've announced a £600 million investment into construction. Engineering, there's money going into AI and digital. Money going into creators, money going into business services, which is one of the 8 industrial strategies. So you need to kind of align when you're thinking of where the money is going to go and what the kind of new skills we're going to see in the investment in existing skills. It's going to be predominantly focused around the 8 sectors. The second direction of travel, something very close both to the Prime Minister and to Bridget Phillipson, is the opportunity mission. And so, of course, whilst the industrial strategy provides the economic rationale for skills reform, the government's agenda is also driven by powerful political and social mission. And in fact, the Prime Minister has used a great phrase, which I actually like, which is the sheep and goats mentality in one of his speeches, where he talks about the artificial divide between the traditional academic education and vocational and skills education, saying that artificial divide has got to end. And this is something the previous government was trying to do, but I think the way the Prime Minister put that, I think, was quite a good expression. But what that means in terms of opportunity is that there's a huge focus on young people. They want to make the apprenticeship levy more flexible so that companies will be able to use it for new foundation apprenticeships, for example, again, directly aimed at young people to try and encourage more to do apprenticeships. They're pivoting away from funding level 7, something I have big concerns about, but the reason they say that they're doing it is because they want to fund more level 2 foundation apprenticeships, level 2s and level 3s. They're prioritizing early careers. And then, of course, there's the collaborative working between the Department for Work and Pensions and the new, we've seen the Get Britain Working White paper published in November last year, and the youth guarantee. And that's a flagship policy offering all 18 to 21-year-olds literally a guarantee of a job or quality training or education. And they're using some pilot areas to do that, 8 trailblazer areas, including Liverpool and the Tees Valley. And the DfE and the DWP are working together on that. So that's the second direction of travel. If the first direction of travel is the skills priorities, the second direction of travel is absolutely trying to fulfill the government's mission of extending opportunity, helping the disadvantaged. Very important to Bridget Phillipson and the Prime Minister. The third direction of travel is place-based, the place-based agenda. So what does that mean in practice? In some ways, it's a carrying on of the old Boris Johnson levelling up agenda, but quite a bit more. So the mayors, they want to shift power from Whitehall to the town hall. So there's going to be quite a few directly elected mayors across the country. Some mayoral authorities will have more powers than others, but in essence, they're going to devolve adult skills. Mayors will have much more say over the local skills improvement plans. Those were previously organised primarily by the local chambers of commerce. And they're kind of very slightly opening the door to kind of innovative pilot programs. So only last week I spoke at the Mayor of Manchester's MBAC Summit. That is called the Manchester Baccalaureate, which is aimed at getting people from 14 to 19 to be involved in vocational education and schools working with employers. The government have said that they see that as a good pilot. And if that scheme is very successful, and I think it's a very impressive scheme, you could see more of that going on across the country. But definitely the direction of travel, whilst there's a national strategy, you've got your 4 pillars, which I mentioned, you've got your 3-direction national strategy, there is absolutely, the aim is to kind of devolve more and make mayors more responsible and local areas more responsible for the skills needs that they have. And I think that actually the devolution agenda is fundamentally reshaping the governance of adult skills, particularly in England. I think it's going to create opportunities for local innovation, but it does prevent long-term challenges because you'll have different regions doing their own distinct approaches, but also working with the national strategy set by the industrial strategy and the Skills England board as well. So I hope that has given you a kind of a quick overview of what's going on. I'd be very pleased to take questions, and I apologise again for the tech issues earlier.
As you say, Rob, a lot going on, a lot going on. It's very nice to be able to see you and hear you so clearly now. As Rob said, we'd be grateful for any questions. You can either pop your questions in the chat box, or you can put your hand up, and I can allow you to speak so you can kind of ask your question directly. But to kick off from me, Rob, there's so much going on, and there was a lot going on in this space before the election too. I was at an event last weekend with your successor, Jackie Smith, and she was she spoke very highly about your time in office. So would you say much of this is, how much would you say is continuity from what came before? How much would you say there's quite a distinct break from the past and a change of direction?
Yeah, so the way I'd put it, by the way, I have, without this turning to mutual loving, I have a lot of respect for Jackie Smith, and I think she's a very impressive minister. And I think she was put there because she knows how it all works, and also because they're very keen that they work with the Home Office and other departments, particularly in terms of skills coming into the country and what skills we need from overseas, and all the migration issues. And I think Jackie's experience as a Home Office minister in the previous Home Secretary, in fact, in the previous Labour government, I think will make a huge difference. I think the way I would put it is the government keeping the foundations of the house. So the foundations are very, very important for the building of any house. So it's still a predominantly employer-led system, although there are kind of chinks to that. They're keeping most of the apprenticeship reforms. The growth and skills levy won't be a 50%, half apprenticeships, half skills. Now, I think it will be much more diluted. We still don't know the final details. But I do think they're moving around the furniture and changing a lot of the rooms within that house. And that's through some of the things that I've mentioned. I think there's a bigger focus on priorities linked to the industrial strategy report. And I think in, I actually support that. I think there's a golden thread between the industrial strategy and the Skills England and the spending review as well. And I think that is important as well. I think, and also what's going on with the DWP. They're absolutely. What really is different is this move away from higher level apprenticeships, and this is where I have real concerns. They have announced that they're not funding any level 7 apprenticeships post 21, and that money is being pivoted. I also worry about quality, that they're reducing the time that people have to do apprenticeships, not all apprenticeships, but some apprenticeships, from 12 to 8 months. As well, I think that is worrying because we don't want to dilute quality. We already have spent less hours on doing our apprenticeships than other OECD countries. So there are changes. The new mayors, for example, the devolution, further devolution of adult skills. There are significant changes inside the house, but I do think the foundation or the fundamentals of the new system that was created over the last 10 years are being kept the same.
Something which we hear a lot from business leaders that we speak with is that businesses want to take on apprentices, they want to be doing more, but they're perhaps not quite sure how to go about engaging with things like the apprenticeship levy and obtaining that funding that would help them support that. Obviously, as you are saying there, that the government has said that as part of the new growth and skills levy, they want to make it easier for businesses to engage with this. But what would you say to any business leaders that might be on this call that are considering hiring an apprentice or looking into how they might be able to go do that?
Well, so there are levy payers and there are non-levy payers, and I'm a huge supporter of the apprenticeship levy. I think it's a Ronseal levy. It does what it says on the tin. Of course, it can be reformed, and of course, there can be changes. I'm not against. I'm not saying it should be kind of put in aspic. But I know I've been around all over the country, and I've seen great big businesses use the apprenticeship levy brilliantly. Amazon, for example, are use the apprenticeship levy very, very well. They're committed to apprenticeships. Google, British Telecom, some of the big retail companies, Bristol Ports Authority. There are many, many examples of great companies. If it is difficult or complicated, which I don't think it is actually, but if people are unsure of it, the DFE has people there to help levy payers pay to work out how to use the levy, and it's usually because people are less aware of it, and perhaps there should be more done on communication. If you take, for example, schools, MATs, multi academy trusts, they only use 20. Their levy spend is about 180 million, but they only use 22 million pounds of that of their levy. They only use 22% of their levy overall. Now that to me is a disaster because they're losing free training. Because that money then gets snaffled away by the Treasury. Although a lot of it, the money that's snaffled away, then gets used to fund SMEs for the training costs for their apprentices who don't pay the levy. But nevertheless, schools are losing literally using free training money by not using the levy. And it's the same with levy payers and so on. So, but there is a lot of information now out there. As I say, it doesn't mean that there shouldn't be reforms or changes, but I would look at the companies who are using the levy well and see what they're doing and talk to them, and then that will help perhaps you use your levy.
And what are your expectations for the growth and skills levy? What are some of the key changes that you can anticipate coming down the pipeline?
So it's hard to know. But the speculation is that companies will be able to use it for some skills qualifications. There's talk that higher technical qualifications may be in the offering, or boot camps. And I'm very supportive of boot camps. Boot camps are 16-week training courses. They're kind of like a super fast accelerated apprenticeship. You're guaranteed a job interview as well. And so it may be that they allow the levy to be used. That, funnily enough, although I am an apprenticeship levy purist, I have less of a problem if it's used for boot camps and for higher technical qualifications, because we have, I think it's just 10% of adults have level 4 and level 5s in our country. We're lower than most OECD countries, and just 4% of young people. So, if more people are doing level 4s and 5s, higher technical qualifications, I have less of a problem with that. The one other big thing coming through, which is going to change the nature of things, is from the, late 26, early 2027, the lifelong learning entitlement is coming through. And that is really important, because that is going to allow individuals to borrow loans of up to £38,000 plus to do short courses or modules of courses from level 4 to level 6. It's going to start off with level 4 and 5 first, and then move to level 6. And what that will mean will be that people will be able to move around from FE college to university, and they'll be able to start at a time of their own choosing, rather than saying you have to turn up in September and do a 3-year course at university. They'll be able to do short courses. So you might get someone doing a short course in mechanical engineering at their local FE college, and that might be enough for the employer. Then 6 months later or a year later, they may do an electrical engineering course at a university. So education will become a train journey that you hop on and off at different stations, rather than just getting on the train and having one end destination that takes quite a long time to get there. I think that is quite exciting, and I do see that actually what will happen is, I think, although the individual takes out the loan who wants to do that training, that companies may offer matched funding or help fund that loan. But I think once that comes through, it's going to have a huge impact on the nature of education in our country, and also an impact on the way people go to universities. Once it's bedded in, will people necessarily need to go to university for 3 years? Some will still want to do that, but I think it's going to change behaviours quite considerably.
I think lifelong learning is going to be something that we're all increasingly thinking about and engaging with as we enter this new AI world where jobs will constantly be changing, which is very exciting, but it really puts into kind of focus the need to make sure people can access learning whenever they need. But I can see lots of questions coming through in the chat box, so I want to make sure I can get through them all. So Peter Walker asked, will the funding for levels 2 and 3 be reviewed to ensure the training can be offered by the training providers? Currently, the funding is too low, making it difficult to find providers to offer levels 2 and 3.
Yes, so that's a really important question. In essence, the funding of the standards for those level 2s and 3s. Now, when I was in office, a lot of the funding for the various standards was increased. But that is where I'd put the money. I would put the money increasing the funding. I think the government are going to carry on doing some of that, but I suspect where it will come, linking back to what I said earlier, is it will be focused on the priorities, the priorities set out in the Industrial Strategy and Skills England. So I think that is where the money is going to go. But I know that Skills England will be looking at reviewing funding bands, just as the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education was, and had made some increases.
And Richard Bryans asks, is the government sufficiently supportive of IoTs? Will they fund this by reducing commitment to underperforming universities?
So I think that's a great question. I was a passionate supporter of Institutes of Technology. There were 21 around the country. There were collaborations with universities, FE and business. I think they were one of the great skills reforms of the last few years, and not enough was said about them. I tried to talk about it all the time when I was in office, and I see those as the future. They focused on level 4, level 5, and also degree apprenticeships as well. And I liked it because there were collaborations between FE colleges as well in the regions. So they brought a lot of colleges together rather than people operating in silos. I would like to see a lot more of those. The government have said that they're going to introduce new technical excellent colleges, and they're funding it. I suspect those will be sort of like IoTs, but initially they're going to be focused on construction, and I think they're going to be added to existing further education colleges. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. But I would like to continue rolling out IoTs. I think they're a very, very good option for people, from adults to do education, post 16 education. I think they're a very, very good option. I personally would have one in every region in the country. I don't know. I think whether or not you would take money away from universities to fund them. I think that was the premise of the question. I don't know. But what's interesting is that when we were in office, we were very clear that university courses needed to be about good outcomes, good completion, continuation, completion, and progression. And interestingly, the Bridget Phillipson and Jackie Smith have been very clear that they're pursuing that line, that they want university to be more about skills and to be quite tough on the universities that aren't giving good outcomes for their students. So I think actually also I think the market will decide actually, because if students feel that they're going to get a better education going to an IoT or the new technical excellence colleges, I think it will have an impact on universities. There aren't quite enough IoTs at the moment to make a huge difference. But I completely understand the premise of your question.
I can see that Richard has just said, many thanks. I want to help build one in North Kensington. So that could be a fun little project for you guys to work on. Pete Milsom from UCAS asks, reports earlier this year of the decline of graduate opportunities are alarming. One diagnosis is that AI is now doing the work that entry-level recruits have traditionally done. How do you see apprenticeships, graduate jobs, and other skills programs having to change to meet the new challenge of AI and to make sure people can access those early opportunities as a gateway to great careers?
Yes, so this is a really, really detailed question. I think that we could probably have two seminars on AI and the impact. I think the impact of AI is going to be huge. In fact, I wrote a LinkedIn post a few weeks ago because there was an article in the Sunday Times saying how terrible it was that loads of students were using AI to write essays. Well, they didn't point out that, of course, loads of lecturers are also using AI to do their lectures and marking and so on. And I would actually more worry about they're saying, oh, 50% of students are doing AI, using AI. I'd be worried about the 50% of students who weren't using AI at all. Now, that doesn't mean I want people to cheat, of course not. But I think Pandora's box has been open. I think that AI is going to have a huge, huge impact on education and skills and learning. And you can't just say don't use it and have a kind of Luddite approach. It's just not feasible. Or we're going to, have so-called scraping to check whether people have used AI. I think that we need to completely change our curriculum all the way from school onwards. And I hope the new curriculum review that will by Becky Francis, which is coming out at the end of the year, will talk about this and embed how to use AI and embed critical thinking and how use AI to analyze things. And then what will happen, I suspect, is we'll move to a system where you have more personal tutors rather than lecturers at university, or even doing an apprenticeship. And what the personal tutor will be doing is testing that student to understand, whilst they welcoming their use of AI, but to test that they really understand the issue. What you need to teach people is how to use this and how to use it critically, and not that it's a cheating mechanism, but actually that it's an enabling mechanism. But you need to be able to ask it the right questions, what the questions mean, and you need to be able to analyze it. And then you need to be able to show that you really know what you have learned from it by using the help of AI, because this is going to make a huge, huge difference. So we need to. My personal preference is actually that the government would set up a royal commission to look at the impact on AI on all education and how to respond to it, and have the best kind of scientists, teachers, academics in the country looking at this, because AI isn't changing every year, it's changing every week. It's completely becoming more and more advanced. And I don't think we are preparing in the education system enough as a country to use it. And I think we have a Luddite approach in some quarters, as I mentioned, the article that was in the Sunday Times. And so, I mean, I think as Susskind, AI expert, talks about that maybe 20 or 30% of a child's time in school should be used to learn AI and how to use it. So I think we need a fundamental rethink, but it is going to have a huge impact. Why do you need lecturers in the future? You have online when everything can be done by AI. Podcasts can be done on AI within a few minutes, if not a few seconds. So why do you need that? What you do need, I think, is more personal tuition and mentoring and teaching people how to use it and testing whether, although they've used their AI, as I say, that they've understood it and that they really know, can demonstrate that they're competent in a specific area.
Rob, I know that one of your favorite phrases is ladders of opportunity, talking about the pathways that people can take on their careers and how learning and education can help further that. But what would you say to the argument or the worry that that bottom rung on that ladder because of AI is becoming harder and harder to grab onto? The jobs just are
Yeah,
disappearing.
so I think that's again, that is the worry, because we already have a digital divide in this country. I remember being, I'm speaking to you from a, normally the tech does work, but from a very, good Samsung tablet, and I've got a Samsung Fold phone and so on. But I used to have people come and see me in my constituency with a phone that was 3 or 4 years old, my constituency surgery, with maybe 1 or 2 gigabytes of data if they were lucky, from people from very disadvantaged or challenged income backgrounds. So, and we saw during COVID the digital divide. It's huge. I think this is why it needs to be taught in the schools. And I'm not an advocate. I'm not advertising for Google here, but I think that Chromebooks personally could play a huge role because they're so cheap and they don't require any software to be installed or virus software or and so on. You can buy them for literally 150, £200, the cheapest ones, and you can still operate AI on them. Obviously, not if you're doing high level stuff, but I think we really need to think how to make sure that we engage. This is where I go back to the previous question when I talked about mentoring and support. I'm a huge believer in mentoring. I would invest in really successful mentoring and support organizations that are helping mentor those from the most disadvantaged backgrounds, because we forget about teaching them how to use AI. We're talking about getting them to even know how to use a computer or what the internet is or how to use it and so on often. So I think a lot of work will be done on that, so we don't make sure that AI becomes the kind of tool of the privileged classes, and those the disadvantaged fall off even more.
It's a really important point there. Graham Short asks, will any major government contracts or industries where there is significant public subsidy have any youth employability or apprenticeship strings attached?
There is, in terms of procurement, there is kind of. I tried to bring in actually when I was a backbencher, laws that would say that if you accepted government contracts, you would have to employ apprentices. There are laws saying there has to be social value. That's national government and local government in terms of procurement. So I would, but not specifically about apprenticeships. Having said that, given the direction of travel and the government's priorities in terms of skills, if I was bidding for a government contract, I would make it very clear that this would mean, let if it was in one of the government's key areas, whether it's energy, life science, whatever it may be, I would say, well, this will mean an extra X life science apprenticeships or X life science apprenticeship skills and what you were doing.
And Roy Perlson asks, is there any plan to restructure job centres and provide a modern support system to people who lost their job?
There is. The government have said they want to restructure job centres, and I welcome this. There was a lot of duplication between the government, the DWP, and the Department for Education. Often they were doing the same things. I always felt that the DFE should be about training and skills, and the DWP should be about getting people into work. And there would seem to be a lot of organisations doing the overlap, CV training and so on. And I thought that was unnecessary. The government are kind of merging the National Careers Service into the Job Centre, which I think is a good thing. The National Careers Service was run by the DFE, and they say they're going to look at what goes, reforming the job centres. We don't yet know the full detail, but I think there's a lot of money in the system. It may not be enough, but there's the reason why I say that is because there's an enormous amount of duplication going on in terms of careers advice. There's a programs done by the DWB sector. It's called the SWAP, Sector Work Based Academy Programs, and then you've got boot camps done by the DfE. So it seems to me there's a lot of overlap. They may be slightly different and different clientele, but there's a lot of overlap, a lot of resources that might be possibly spent in a wiser way. So I hope that the direction of travel, from what the government's saying with the careers service and looking at restructuring the job centre, is in the right direction. I think it is.
And obviously, this is a real kind of key agenda item for the government, getting Britain working again. A few weeks ago, we had all the controversy about the welfare cuts that the government was trying to make, that obviously being part of the stick to get people back into work. But more broadly on that agenda, Rob, do you think the government is doing enough? We see month after month unemployment slowly starting to tick upwards after a very large rise in activity post-pandemic. So it feels like there's this real need for a national mission to get people back to work. And I'm not sure if the action is in full enough to really tackle that. But what do you think?
I think the intention, the wish is there, and the direction of travel is right. I mean, I like what Liz Kendall is saying about the youth guarantee and the trial places, which I mentioned in my opening remarks. That could be quite exciting. I wanted something called an apprenticeship guarantee when I was in office, but the youth guarantee, I think, is a good thing. And if it works in these pilot areas, I think they'll extend it. It requires a lot of resources because they're working with local organisations to make it happen. I like the government's, Liz Kendall's thing called Right to Try. What that means is that people will be able to get jobs without necessarily losing their benefits. And I think that is a key thing. I cannot, the countless people I met as a constituency MP who said they wanted to work but couldn't afford because they would lose all their universal credit or whatever it might be. And it was less money in essence, or only very slightly more. So why have all the aggro? So I think if that can be extended, this right to try thing, where people can not necessarily lose their benefits immediately and get on the job ladder of opportunity, I think that will make a huge difference. I think the problem is that the Prime Minister's got one hand tied behind his back. I think he and Liz Kendall and Rachel Reeves want to do all these things, but of course they've got their hand tied behind the back because of the political challenges in his own party, as we've seen with the welfare reforms. I supported the original welfare reforms. They may not have been revolutionary, but they were definitely evolutionary in the right direction. We need to get people off the welfare bill and do everything possible to get people into work. And so I think it's difficult. It's difficult to see what will happen. I think they're determined to get something through, and I think if they get anything through, I think it could be the right to try. Because why would Labour backbenchers be opposed to someone keeping their benefits if they get a job, because they're not losing anything, at least initially. But I think the jury's out of how much they'll be able to get through.
I think welfare reform is something that we'll be talking about over the years to come. Peter, who asked the earlier question on level 2 and level 3 apprenticeships, says we need more involvement from the SMEs to take on apprentices. Can more flexibility be considered that allows SMEs to have access and support from the colleges and providers? Geography can be a problem for SMEs.
Yes, so I think the big problem, and this happened under the previous government, was that the decline in SME apprenticeships, particularly for young people. The way I think that we can change that, absolutely doing the things that you have just suggested, Peter. But I actually think what really will make the difference are two things. One is slashing the regulation, so that the small business doesn't have to do anything at all. I would have everything done by the provider, apart from obviously the pay. It's sort of half happens by some providers now, but I would literally take off the burden of any of the red tape and the bureaucracy from the business. The other important thing is a financial incentive. We did some of that. So the last thing I did when I was in office, we introduced, managed to get it through, was 100% of the training costs 16 to 21 are now funded by the government. and for 16 to 21. And of course, there are other financial incentives that you get, £1,000 if you have a younger person or a send apprentice. Or I think what will really make the difference is something which I've campaigned for a long time: skills tax relief. So I would like to see any business, businesses at the moment have a research and development credit. So if they invest in research and development, they get a tax credit. I would like to see a similar system, that if a business invested in skills, particularly for younger people, and perhaps you could focus this around SMEs, they would get some kind of skills tax rebate from the government. I think that's what would really change things to make it financially viable for SMEs to have an apprentice.
I think that's a topic where there's a lot of thinking going on at the moment and a definite need for action. So watch this space. Rob, one of the things that I was really lucky to do with you was go up and visit the Stansted College, which I think is a great example of a local business or local businesses working with local educational institutions to really deliver amazing things for young people. Do you want to talk a little bit about that model and perhaps how others might be able to replicate it?
Yes, so it's something I'm very proud of. I chaired the advisory board of the Stansted Airport College. It's part of the Harlow College group. And it's funny to see because only a few years ago I think it was 2017 or 2016, I was with the then Minister for Business, who was called Claire Perry, putting a spade in the ground on an empty site at Stansted Airport to build this college. Now, what has happened is that this is the only college of its kind inside an airport in the country. It's significantly backed by the Manchester Airport Group, which I think is an incredible company and very community minded. They've obviously got a business to run, but they really care about skills and apprenticeships, and they've invested in the college. If you go into the courtyard of the college, they have a plane in the courtyard where the students work on. They have multi-million-pound engines in the laboratories. Students can do everything from aircraft engineering right through to cabin crew, and also airport events and airport retail, which apparently is very different from normal events and normal retail. And they teach everything from BTECs, T-levels, apprenticeships, you name it. And they have all the backing from the key employers, the key aircraft employers and airlines. 99% of students who go to that college have good outcomes. I think that is an amazing figure. And I think that is what shows what can be done from the best of our FE colleges. But it's work, to go back to the question about the IoTs, because it's a collaboration with business, it's a collaboration with forward-thinking employers, and the best of skills, the best of FE. And I always think, and the college, the mind of the college is to get people into work. That you go. And by the way, they do a huge focus on the disadvantaged as well. Huge focus, especially from adult disadvantage. And again, if that's in one of the another building inside the airport, because of the support of the Manchester Airport Group, as I say, in my view, an extraordinary company. Even if we don't like the parking charges at airports, but it's an extraordinary company nevertheless. And so I think that is a model. The collaboration with employer. They're giving them the land inside the airport where the college is now exists, and other buildings. They support and back the college in every single way. There are other local employers on board supporting the college, employers on the governing board. So I think that is a model, absolutely, for other educational institutions. I think all education in the future will be about employability. And I think the nature of university is going to change hugely, not just because of the lifelong learning entitlement, but I think you'll see more pop-up universities, mobile universities, whereby they're predominantly focused on employment. And if you look, the MP in Herefordshire, Jesse Norman, there is he's set up with local people a new university where they teach mathematics. And it's quite incredible what they're doing. That's a brand new university. You've got the Dyson New University, where people do their learning, but then work in the factories and they get jobs at Dyson afterwards. I think one day you might have a British Museum University or a Natural History Museum University where people work in a museum and do whatever field they want to do, whether it's archaeology, creating, whatever it might be. So I think the way learning is going to change. At the moment, you do a degree to get a job. I think the way things are changing is that you're going to, in essence, while you're doing your job and training, you get a degree. And I think that is going to be, or get a big qualification. I think that is the change that is happening. And I think some of the very, very traditional universities, like some of the Russell Group, not all, are operating as they did 30 years ago when I went to university. And I think it's really changed. I think they're operating in a black cab world when everyone's moving to Uber, in essence. And no offense to black cabs, I love them. And I can understand the difficulties, but I think universities are using the same system that operated. Whereas you've got these new pop-up universities, the challenger universities, the IoTs, disruptors, the new degree apprenticeships, the lifelong learning entitlement, huge changes coming through. The AI having kind of massive impact on adult learning and higher education in the years to come.
Rob, that's all so fascinating to listen to. I think we're going to have to schedule another session in to talk about AI and the future of learning and the future of work because it's such an interesting topic. But thank you to everybody for joining today. I can see that we're already over time, so I'll let you all go and grab some lunch. But before we go, Rob, a massive thank you. So insightful and really, really appreciate it. All the best, everyone.